In this room, an emperor admired paintings and works of calligraphy. "200 years ago, Emperor Qianlong would often sit in a small room of less than 6 square meters and quietly appreciate 3 works of calligraphy. They were Boyuan script by Wan Sun, Mid-Autumn script by Wang Xianju, and A Clear Sky After a Quick Snowfall by Wang Shiju. Emperor Qianlong regarded them as the most delicate among the huge collection of calligraphic works acquired by the Qing dynasty, and so he renamed this small room the Hall of 3 Treasures. This emperor brought the Qing court's collection of paintings and calligraphic works to a new height, creating a brilliant page in the history of paintings and calligraphic works in China. During his reign of more than half a century, Emperor Qianlong turned the imperial palace into the largest museum of paintings and works of calligraphy in China. Although many people of today may not be aware of it, some of the most precious works were stored here. Over a period of nearly 600 years, these works had carried forward the aesthetic values and concepts of the Chinese civilization. Emperor Qianlong's reign occurred during a flourishing age, and so his personal hobby resulted in an unprecedented gathering of paintings and works of calligraphy. In fact, during his 60-year reign, almost all the important artworks in the history of China eventually found their way into the Forbidden City. These most precious paintings and calligraphic works, which we can see today in the Palace Museum, are almost all available to us due to Emperor Qianlong's lifelong pursuit of collecting art. The first batch of works to be collected in this imperial palace came from the court collection of the Yuan dynasty. The Ming dynasty took over all the things left behind by the former dynasty, and so all the precious paintings and calligraphic works of the Yuan imperial court bear the personal seal of their new masters. Zhu Yuanzhang, the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, had no interest in paintings and calligraphic works. Li Gongling, a famous painter in the Song dynasty, had created some truly wonderful paintings, yet when the first Ming emperor commented on one of his paintings of horses, he could only say, "There are so many horses grazing on the outskirts. I wish they could bring benefits to later generations and safeguard the frontier." This emperor, who was good at riding horses and fighting, could appreciate only the practical use of horses. Basically, no active collecting efforts were made by the Ming court at all, although when the court convicted a minister of some offense or other, it would take possession of objects for the court collection. The 10th year of the reign of Emperor Wan Li saw the death of Zhang Zhuzhang, who had a large collection of paintings and calligraphic works. Emperor Wan Li was a rare eccentric, famous for his meanness and avarice, who, as the master of the country, was only interested in gold, silver, money, and other valuables. When some of Zhang Zhuzhang's political opponents began to expose his former wrongdoings and told the emperor that Zhang Zhuzhang's wealth may well match that of the state, Emperor Wanli ordered Zhang Zhuzhang's house to be searched and his property confiscated. And so it was in this way that some very important paintings and calligraphic works owned by officials became part of the court collection, although the original intention had simply been to accomplish a transfer of wealth. Unfortunately, during the Ming Dynasty, the court collection of paintings and calligraphic works became smaller and smaller, as they were increasingly sold to pay soldiers and buy provisions.
因为已经到明末了，因为当时是两线作战，那么就是一个是要在国内来围剿这些起义军，那么在关外就要对满清来作战，所以呢，就是这个军饷就造成了国家的国库是已经是非常空虚的。直到这个起义军围城的时候，崇祯他也是在《明记北略》这本书里记载。 他搜刮这个宫中，只搜刮了30万两来注饷。
By the time the last emperor of the Ming Dynasty, Emperor Zhongzhen, hanged himself at Meishan Hill, the Forbidden City behind him was already an empty palace. The new master of the Forbidden City was from the north, but he soon found that the Chinese culture he had inherited as its new ruler very interesting. During what was to be the flourishing age of this dynasty, Kangxi, who was an open-minded emperor, acquired profound knowledge of the culture of the Han ethnic group by gathering many Han civil officials around him, and he treated them with respect. One of them was named Gao Shiji.
时候呢，康熙有些地理这个知识啊，这个风俗人情啊，就要咨询他，他都能够很快的回答。康熙有些诗要做了以后，他可以来奉贺这些词，所以很得康熙的这个欢喜。
Gao Shiji was not only obsequious but also shrewd, even daring to present forged paintings and calligraphic works to the emperor. The paintings and calligraphic works he presented to the emperor were recorded in one of his books entitled Zheng Zun's Records in Summertime. In the record, Gao Shiji describes characteristics pertaining to the appearance of each painting in calligraphic work in detail, but fails to mention if it was an original or not. Besides the published work Zheng Zun's Records in Summertime, Gao Shiji compiled another list of paintings and calligraphic works which bore the title Catalogue of Zheng Zun's Calligraphic Works and Paintings.
另外一本是他自己这个私家这个珍秘的一个底账，它最重要的有2个内容，一个内容呢是说他对于这件藏品他自己的这个鉴定意见，他是注明白的。 那么第2点呢，就是这个东西是可以进献给皇帝的，还是说可以随便馈赠给亲戚朋友的？这也在这个东西边上都注出来。
His intention in doing this was simple: to make it possible for these elaborate art forgeries to be presented to the emperor. The original masterpieces could then be retained in his own private collection. Ironically, however, after Gao Shiji's death, his collection became part of the imperial court collection. It has to be said that his canniness in protecting his collection of art was very impressive, but in the end his shrewdness could not win the advantage over time and imperial power. 32 years after Gao Shiji's death, the grandson of Emperor Kangxi, Hongli, ascended the throne, and the title of his reign was Qianlong. Emperor Qianlong was certainly a match for Gao Shiji and his zeal for paintings and works of calligraphy, but he had no idea that the works apparently signed by Wang Shizhi and Wang Shenzhi were in fact copies made during the Tang and Sung dynasties. Only Bo Yuan script from the Eastern Jin period by Wang Chun was an original. Like the 3 calligraphic works in the Hall of Three Treasures, almost all the paintings and works of calligraphy were placed in danger in their history of 1,000 years or more before finally becoming a part of the collection in the Forbidden City. And certainly there had been some monumental disasters in the history of art collection in China. More than 1,400 years ago, during the Southern and Northern dynasties, Emperor Shaoyi of the Liang regime was besieged in Jianling City by troops from the Western Wei, and on the night before his surrender, he set fire to his collection of 140,000 pieces of art, a collection of the best paintings, calligraphic works, and ancient books and records in China at the time. More than 1,300 years ago, Emperor Yongdi of the Sui dynasty decided to take a trip to Yangzhou along the Grand Canal, taking famous paintings and calligraphic works that he had collected in Luoyang with him in the boat. The boat capsized, and more than half of the paintings and calligraphic works fell into the water. More than 800 years ago, when Jin troops captured Bianling, the collection of Emperor Weisong of the Song dynasty, a collection quite unprecedented, was scattered and lost. It is not at all difficult to understand why Emperor Qianlong appreciated these 3 rare model calligraphic works so much, and certainly we are fortunate to be able to see them today. For several thousand years, the fate of China's paintings and works of calligraphy was closely associated with the fate of China's supreme rulers and changes in power. We are fortunate to be able to see such works from 300 years ago in the Palace Museum. In the late Ming Dynasty, when war began to break out in a number of places, many rare paintings and calligraphic works dating to before the Song and Yuan dynasties was scattered among the common people. By the time of the reign of Emperor Kangxi in the Qin dynasty, many of these important paintings and works of calligraphy were owned by just a small number of collectors. When Emperor Qianlong began to collect paintings and calligraphic works from the common people, he found that there were a huge amount of masterpieces ready for the taking. Before these paintings and calligraphic works became part of the court collection, their owners had made them their own by imprinting them with their personal seal. These seals recorded the fate of each of these works of art. This painting, entitled Cold Forest and Snow, was executed by Feng Quan, a master painter in the Northern Song dynasty. In the past, it was part of the collection in the Forbidden City, but today it is the most valuable treasure in the Tianjin Museum. The painting had been passed among the common people before finally being collected by a wealthy salt merchant named An Qi in Tianjin during the reign of Emperor Kangxi. An Qi had made his fortune in the late years of the reign of Emperor Kangxi by selling salt. After he had collected enough ancient paintings and calligraphic works, he compiled a catalog for his collection and named it A Collection of Fortunes in Ink. Judging from the notes of the book, the collection of Anqi featured a large number of artworks, and the bulk of the collection consisted of old, rare pieces by famous artists. By the early years of the reign of Emperor Qianlong, the salt fields in Tianjin had been moved away, and new salt merchants had taken the place of old salt merchants. The An family fell into decline. A large number of the fine paintings and works of calligraphy that had been collected by Anqi were bought by the court. Among the works in Anqi's collection, which became part of the collection of Emperor Qianlong, was one particular landscape painting that was very special because of an anecdote about it. This masterpiece by Wan Gonghuang, a painter in the Yuan dynasty, is called Dwelling in the Fuquan Mountains. This painting that represented the zenith of Chinese painting was owned and turned by many people in the 300 years since it was created. In the late Ming dynasty, when a man named Wu Wenqing became its new owner, he was so delighted he could hardly bear to put it down. An annotation on the painting tells us that he took it with him when he had meals and when he slept. During the confusion of war, he abandoned all his property, but took this painting with him when he fled his home. Wu Wenqing loved this painting so much, he even wanted to burn it before his death. Wu Wenqing was in the process of burning Dwelling in the Fuquan Mountains, but then at this critical moment his nephew took it out of the fire. The masterpiece had been partially burned and was now in two parts. The two parts of Dwelling in the Fuquan Mountains were mounted separately by the Wu family. One part was mounted as an independent painting and was called Leftover Mountain, and this was kept in the Zhejiang Provincial Museum. The other part, which was the main body of the original work, was mounted in a different way. In order to conceal traces of burn marks, the Wu family cut the annotation made by Dong Qichang from the lower part of the painting and transferred it to the other part. And this is the Dwelling in Fuquan Mountains as collected by Emperor Qianlong. While the Wu Yongzhi copy is not the entire painting, it does retain the rich ink and the simple yet profound artistic conception of the entire work. This great masterpiece in the new style of Chinese landscape painting had changed hands many times before finally being bought by Anqi. After Anqi died, the so-called Wu Yongzhi copy of Dwelling in the Fuquan Mountains was presented to Emperor Qianlong in the winter of the 11th year of his reign. He had already collected a scroll that was known as Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, the most famous fake, Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, referred to later as the Zheming copy. The painting, later to be known as the Zheming copy, was a copy of the so-called Wu Yongzhi copy of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, and it was made by a painter in the late Ming Dynasty. But with regards to this, Emperor Qianlong had remained in the dark. It is in fact not hard to detect some of the flaws in the Zheming copy. In the Yuan dynasty, the inscription of the painter was written in the background of the painting, but in the Zheming copy, the inscription is in the upper blank space. This is a placement that is not consistent with practice in the Yuan dynasty. But Emperor Qianlong's capacity for art appreciation was not advanced enough to detect such flaws, and he treasured this forged copy of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains so much that even the appearance of the real work, the so-called Wu Yongzhi copy, did not make him doubt his own wrong judgment. The emperor insisted that the original, the so-called Wu Yongzhi copy, was a fake. He had, after all, bought it at a very high price. When he asked some of his ministers to watch him make annotations on the two parts of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, which he believed was a fake, his ministers flattered him on his love of art and his open-minded attitude towards the forgery of an artistic work. No one dared to tell him that the Wu Yongzhi copy was in fact the original. Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, collected by Anqi, became part of the court collection and was kept in the Palace of Heavenly Purity for more than 200 years. In 1933, it was moved to South China along with other cultural relics in a time of danger. These two parts of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, stored in the Palace Museum in Taipei, tell a story of the history of the collection of paintings and works of calligraphy in China. From 1799, when Emperor Qianlong died, his son, Emperor Jia Qing, accomplished almost nothing in terms of collecting paintings and works of calligraphy. This was partly because Emperor Jia Qing was not so artistically inclined as his father, but mostly because Emperor Qianlong had already collected almost all the best works in China that could be collected. In order to show that he valued his father's collection and cherished the memory of his father, Emperor Jia Qing decided to seal up all the paintings, calligraphic works, and articles that had been so treasured by Qianlong for safekeeping. Most of Emperor Qianlong's collection was sealed up and stored by Emperor Jia Qing in Yanquan Tower. Sadly, the original building was burnt down in a big fire in 1924, but we can learn about it from the writings of painters from those days. Although he had not inherited his father's interest in collecting works of art, Emperor Jia Qing nevertheless did preserve paintings and calligraphic works in Yanquan Tower, and the famous Festival of Pure Brightness on the river was among them. The Festival of Pure Brightness on the river was first collected by Emperor Weizong of the Song dynasty. Later, however, the whereabouts of the original painting became a mystery due to wars and changes in power, and it did not become part of the court collection until the fall of the powerful official Yan Sung in the Ming dynasty. However, eventually this painting disappeared from the palace, and the key character behind this mysterious disappearance was Wan Fangbao, an ambitious Ming dynasty eunuch.
画呀，我琢磨着有文章可读。为什么呢？因为他知道这个东西是在宫里头的，他又认为这个东西是非常重要的东西。那么今天他怎么得到这个东西？他没有讲。这个就是我们就反过来推测，说，如果是皇帝直接赏赐给他的话，你说不是喜欢吗？我就送给你了，他就会大书特书，皇帝怎么把这个东西，我怎么不高兴，对不对？他不讲，他只讲好，不讲这个怎么来的，这就有大有文章可读。
However it happened, Feng Bao came into possession of the Festival of Pure Brightness on the River. One story that became widespread among bookshops in Beijing stated that Feng Bao stole the Festival of Pure Brightness on the River from the storehouse, but later became so frightened that he hid it in a drainage hole, planning to take it out of the palace later. But as the story goes, it began to rain, and the rain lasted for 3 days in a row. When the time came to take the Festival of Pure Brightness on the river away, it had been totally ruined by rainwater.
你说这个故事跟红宝计划有没有联系？我觉得有一点联系，因为实际上基本上土没有水啊，也没有水泡的痕迹，就说这个故事也是虚构的。
Experts on paintings and calligraphic works inferred that the story of the destruction of the Festival of Pure Brightness on the river was probably made up by Feng Bao himself in a bizarre attempt to conceal his own wrongdoing. After having been taken out of the Forbidden City, the Festival of Pure Brightness on the river seemed to disappear, and it was not returned to the imperial palace until the 4th year of the reign of Emperor Jia Qing, the year when the super-sovereign Emperor Qianlong died. Hu Xin, who had been a very powerful man in the court, fell from power. But his friend Bi Yuan, the governor of Hubei and Hunan provinces, had died 2 years earlier, and when his house was searched and all his possessions confiscated, among them was the painting The Festival of Pure Brightness on the River. Emperor Qianlong, that ardent lover of paintings and calligraphic works, never had the opportunity to see this masterpiece. Why was the Festival of Pure Brightness on the River so famous? And why had so many people loved it?
首先，它是一个很写实的作品，但是呢，它的写实不是说完全的照本宣科，它是有组织的。所以这么一个大的场面，它从郊区一直画到城市的中心，这一路啊，它所包含的内容、文化的事物啊，相当的丰富。如何去把它组织起来、概括起来，而能够有眼睛可以代表起来，这个处理构思就相当的惊人。你比如说我们在桥上，我们看到了很热烈场面，那肯定是人山人海的，挤得一塌糊涂。底下大圈装过桥洞，要放到桅杆，那个紧张。有的人要想插手帮忙，又插不上，那种情景。你看那个里面的细节啊、情景啊很多，但是我们看它画下来中的组织的有条。另外就是它的表现，你像城门口那一个乞丐，连他那个周围的人的态度我们都能体现。你看有一个人骑着个摩托，回过头来看，他就是不想掏钱，这个心态都能表现出来。这个很简单，几笔就勾下来。所以清面上头就是引人入胜啊，就胜在这个地方。
After the Festival of Pure Brightness on the River became part of the collection of the Forbidden City, it was included in the 3 volumes of treasured works of Pearl Forest and Stonewater Ditch from Secret Hall in the 10th year of the reign of Emperor Jia Qing. All the works collected by Emperor Qianlong were listed with great care in this work. In the 8th year of his reign, Emperor Qianlong had decided to sort out all the paintings and works of calligraphy collected in the court. All works on Buddhism and Taoism were included in treasured works of Pearl Forest and Stonewater Ditch from Secret Hall. In the following year, work began on the compilation Stonewater Ditch collection of paintings and calligraphic works. The task was to put all the paintings and calligraphic works on record, and it was an unprecedented task. The list would be a satisfactory full stop for the 2,000 years of the court collection of paintings and calligraphic works. The completed Stonewater Ditch collection of paintings and calligraphic works in 3 volumes includes 225 books. The work is a summary of the court collection in the Ming and Qing dynasties over the preceding 600 years, the largest imperial collection in Chinese history. This collection in the heyday of the Qing dynasty totaled more than 10,000 pieces, among which were 2,000 paintings and calligraphic works created in the Jing, Tang, Sung, and Yuan dynasties, and 2,000 created in the Ming dynasty. It was the largest collection of ancient Chinese paintings and calligraphic works. Among the collections of paintings in the Imperial Palace are a number of works created by court painters. When we look at this painting, we can see a man with his trouser legs pulled up, playing in the water with his bare feet. But he was no less than Emperor Yongzheng, the most diligent emperor among the 12 Jing emperors, a man who was so busy that he had no time to entertain himself. He asked a court painter to create this style of life portrait. In one portrait, Emperor Yongzheng appears as an old man walking in the mountains. In another, he is depicted playing with some macaques. In a third one, he is sitting in front of a musical instrument. And in yet another one, he is an old man in a cape, fishing by a river on a snowy day. Besides producing life portraits, painters had a more important task: recording the emperor's great accomplishments. The achievements of the emperors in the Qing dynasty were recorded in the form of paintings. The Qing dynasty lasted for almost 300 years before the Republic of China was established in 1911. In its later years, the practice of recording history in the form of paintings was substituted by photography, a practice introduced from the West. The young man in this photo is Puyi, the abdicated emperor of the Qin dynasty. Although when this photo was taken, he was still living in the Forbidden City. Sadly, he stole many precious paintings and works of calligraphy from the imperial palace. This imprint belonged to Puyi, and its style is exactly the same as that of Emperor Qianlong, and is modeled after Emperor Qianlong's artistic style. These seals were made by Puyi's teachers after his abdication, and he then applied them to as many paintings and calligraphic works in the imperial palace as possible. He and his brother Pu Zhi secretly stole more than 1,000 of them out of the palace in the name of granting them as rewards. Many of the best paintings and calligraphic works accumulated in the imperial palace were stolen by these two brothers. This theft of great works of art from the palace was only stopped in the year 1924 when Puyi was finally banished from the imperial palace. The last stealing maneuver took place on the very day when the imperial family left the palace, although on this occasion, Puyi was not the thief.
这里边呢有一个很有心计的老太太，她就是同治皇帝的余妃，姓赫舍里氏，官称呢是静一皇贵妃。这位老太太呀，不知道是什么时间，这个什么机会，她把这个三希堂里边的这个中秋帖和博远帖，偷偷的转移到她自己居住的寿康宫，而且呢，在24年出宫的时候，卷在行李里带回娘家去了。
The two works of calligraphy then changed hands many times before being bought by Baochang, the biggest collector in Beijing. By a decade later, a man by the name of Zhong Borju had become well known among the new generation of collectors. In order to prevent national treasures from being taken out of China, he and his wife Pan Su spent all their money on collecting treasures, and such was their achievement that many of the national treasures we see today were donated by this couple to their country. In 1935, they wanted to buy the two model calligraphic works.
人家开口呢，一个帖就要3000万连币，合到黄金多少呢？1000两，比那个油头都还黑，油头都要800两，他这个要1000两一个帖，那当然不可能了。你根本没这个，也就是没这个财力了。你想，一个帖1000两黄金，两个帖不就2000两黄金吗？2000两黄金，当时我老姨夫根本不可能有这个财力了，那么只好作罢了。
Before 1949, these two calligraphic works were taken to Hong Kong by the son of Guo Baocheng, but at the end of 1951, Premier Zhou Enlai personally approved the purchase of them at the cost of 458,000 Hong Kong dollars. Many changes were to take place in the 20th century, but finally these two rare calligraphic works from the Hall of Three Rarities were returned to the imperial palace. On the days when they are exhibited, visitors can take a look at these two calligraphic works that were so greatly treasured by Emperor Qianlong. At the time Puyi left the imperial palace, clear sky after a quick snowfall was still in the imperial palace. But after the war of resistance against Japanese aggression broke out, this masterpiece, along with other cultural relics, was moved to South China and kept in Nanjing. In 1949, it was taken to Taiwan, and now it is kept in the Palace Museum in Taipei. The 3 calligraphic works from the Hall of Three Rarities were fortunate. Paintings and calligraphic works stored in today's Palace Museum, those stored in the Nanjing Museum, and those kept in the Palace Museum in Taipei are only a very small part of the collection of paintings, calligraphic works, and cultural relics from the past. Some great ancient paintings and works of calligraphy were sadly lost or destroyed due to natural and man-made disasters.
宋张先的石俑图被中国北京故宫博物院以1800万元人民币买走，开创了中国画在国内拍卖的最高价位。
This was the first time museums in China had purchased cultural relics from auction houses. In 1945, Pu Yi had lost this painting in Zhangchun, and it had not been seen in public again until this auction more than 50 years later. China's circle of cultural relics collectors was stunned by its reappearance. This ancient palace, with its large collection of paintings and calligraphic works, is now being tuned to the new rhythm of the 21st century. This painting by Jian Zichen, a painter in the Sui dynasty, is called Spring Outing. It is the oldest authentic painting among the collection of the Palace Museum. This painting on light and fragile silk has been miraculously kept intact through numerous wars, floods, and man-made disasters over a period of 1,400 years. This artwork, along with other ancient paintings and works of calligraphy, has witnessed the evolution of an ancient civilization.